Okay, I'd like to call the October 25th, 2021 meeting of the El Dorado Irrigation District Board of Directors to order. Let's do a roll call.
The meeting's called to order at 9:01. We have Directors Osborne, Veerkamp, Dwyer, and Anzini present. We have General Manager Abercrombie, General Counsel Polson, and Clerk to the Board Sullivan present. Director Day is absent at this time.
Thank you. Please rise, remove your cover if you have a, oh, Alan isn't here, is it? And join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda. Thank you, Director Osborne.
Second.
Thank you, Director Veerkamp. Any board comments? Any public comment on the agenda?
If members of the public would like to address the board at any public comment period during this meeting, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. President Dwyer, at this time, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on the adoption of today's agenda.
Okay. Board members, please vote.
Hit a puddle?
Division 1, 2, 3, and 4, voting aye, motion carries. For the record, Director Alan Day arrived at 9:03 a.m.
Okay, we'll move on to communications. General Manager, do you have employee recognition for us today?
Yes, I received an email from Sarah and Larry Beaver, our customers, EID customers, expressing appreciation for some of our staff, including Charles, and I'll mess up the name, Busatil, okay? Taryn Ferris, Garrett Matyak, Gene Hayden, Dylan Russell, and Seth Borba for their work during a recent repair in their home, or near their home. They stated, I want you to know how I continue to be impressed with EID's care and concern for the residents in its service area. So another very complimentary letter from our customers. And that's the end of the employee recognition.
Thank you very much. It's always nice. It seems like that's a regular occurrence that we get letters in recognition of our employees, so that's fantastic. Is there any public comment on the, just open for public comment for matters not on the agenda?
President Dwyer, at this time, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak during today's public comment period.
Okay, thank you. Back to communications again. General Manager Abercrombie.
I don't have anything specific. Maybe Dan can update us in the water supply report, or if you want to do it now, just some of the activities that occurred over this torrential downpour. And I'm putting them on the spot because I didn't brief them ahead of time.
This falls under the headline, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah. What happened to Lonina?
Yeah. And I'm sure there'll be lots of puns and jokes when we do that update as well. I was literally just getting updates as we were standing there, as you can anticipate, obviously a very rapidly unfolding situation. I think the summary is, yes, we're still in a drought, but obviously we had very significant rainfall in the past 24 hours. I think there's no question here. When I left this morning, I had 8.4 at my house, and it was still raining. So we think it's probably 10 to 11 in the Kybers area.
10.63 as of 7 this morning.
Pretty close. There we go.
0.63 on that.
So really, I think Upcountry has been honestly managing inflow, and we increased releases from the peak last night from Silver Lake was 700 CFS we released from Silver Lake. Shows you the amount of water that was coming in. We were able to comfortably take on some additional water in Caples safely. So we're actually less releases there, and we're in the process of ramping that back down to 5 CFS this morning. So we feel very comfortable in that aspect. On the Echo Lake side, our partners at City South Lake Tahoe, remember they've asked us in the past to try to manage releases. So we've done what we can there. About, Dan's, he'll be coming down in a minute. Seems like around 8, 10 o'clock, we had fortunately that cold front came through and it switched to snow, which is very helpful upcountry. So since then, we've been really managing the lower areas, Jacobson Lake, even though there's tremendous amount of water there at Camp Creek, our water right, we only can take 12.5 CFS until November 1st. So it's a little bit of irony there. But fortunately, Park Creek itself, we did gain 800 acre feet overnight just from the local watershed, plus the 50 or 25 acre feet. Sorry, it's been a long night. 25 acre feet from Camp Creek Tunnel. But so just 800 acre feet just locally coming into Slide Park, and we obviously anticipate that to increase. We gained about 20% of storage to Weber overnight, and that's still rapidly going up. Highest flows I've ever seen, going 80 CFS going into Weber Reservoir. That's pretty impressive. So, but we still got plenty of room there to take on water. Our main focus this morning is maintaining water quality at our treatment plants. We were fortunate. We were a little concerned, obviously, because of the fire at Reservoir A. That treatment plant is designed because of our great water quality. It's not designed to treat the more urban, high turbidity areas. So we did watch a turbidity spike come through this morning. Fortunately, what we did identify, it's just a local watershed that is actually in Park Creek itself, which we're most concerned about, appears to be relatively clear as of this time. The other main focus this morning is actually the Dorado Hills water treatment plant. That actually has the highest turbidities and will continue to rise throughout the day as the South Fork all the way from Coloma, that rush of very turbid water comes down. So Bill is acting manager for that group, and he may elect to go ahead and shut that down and bring more water from Res A just to ensure that we can meet water quality standards. So very rapidly evolving situation. On the other end of the pipe, we did about 6:30 last night when that big cell went through. The collections crew had 15 alarms at once I had to go to. So I know Tracy's staff all night. I taught them several times. They had all the pumper trucks, including the new truck that we had got through the FEMA reimbursement, were all deployed. I know they had some very high flow, I think 16 and 20 million gallons per day inflow of the wastewater treatment plants. Remember, these are 3 to 4 MGDs, so magnitude orders greater the inflow going through. So we'll have a full report at the next board meeting. But all in all, haven't identified any major concerns. Before light came up, they were able to safely get down to the Camp Creek Tunnel and see we do have logs there as we anticipated. And really the telltale sign will be once we get up on Project 184 and see that amount of rain over a brief period of time is concerning. We have been fortunate. We were able to actually operate the canal and the tributaries downstream of the current repairs. So we have actually been running water through Hazel Creek Tunnel and through our diversions into Jacobson Lake. So that's operating as normal, and we'll go ahead and patrol that. But probably tomorrow, maybe the next day, we'll be able to get up to the portions of the canal that were burned over, and that'll give us a true sense of how that's going to affect our restoration schedule. I know Brian's staff, they always work wonders, and we'll be able to give an update the next board meeting on how that fared. So it was a long update, but that's what I have for you, Lisa, a brief update for this morning.
Thank you. The issue of the water quality, can our customers anticipate any noticeable difference in their tap water, or by the time it gets through the plants, will it be, I know it'll be safe to drink, but in terms of taste and appearance?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. That's one that we actually anticipated on Friday as we were kind of going through how we would respond to customers today. At this point, we're not anticipating that. If we do sense that might be the case because of increased chlorine dosage, because of filter backwashing and other technical steps, if we think that might be the case, we'll likely maybe push out an update proactively. But we're not anticipating that to be the case today based upon what we see as of this morning.
Okay, good. That was kind of my point, is if we do anticipate a change in the water taste with additional chlorine or whatever we need to do to make it safe to drink, it would be good if we get out ahead of it and say, you know, we've noticed because of the runoff, because of the fire, we're treating the water more aggressively, or whatever term you want to use. And so you might notice a little different taste in your tap water, but be assured it's safe to drink, and we'll get it back to normal when we can.
Thank you.
So I was thinking about it all weekend, our construction sites, the Flume construction sites, so we won't know till tomorrow or Wednesday.
I think Brian will give you the full update. I know they did a safety shutdown yesterday. He'll probably have a more full update for
Yeah.
construction.
Yeah, just for today, I just asked Kerry how it went over the weekend. He said it was pretty minor. There's some sloughing along roads and that type of thing, but nothing, major of concern yet that we know of. But yeah, again, we have guys up there, inspectors up there taking a look now. I went up and looked at the main ditch, because we've got that under construction, of course. At about 2 o'clock yesterday, the flows in the ditch look fine, and our contractor did a really good job of cleaning up the site and getting the ditch, ready to accept storm water. So
Right.
that looked good. I don't know, again, same type of thing. We need to go up there and check it out in the next couple days.
Check out the flumes, yeah.
See how the main ditch project fared. But those are the two ones that I was concerned about over the weekend. It looks like we're good so far.
Good.
You know, the contractors were working on there to prevent a lot of erosion, things like that, given the lead time of the storm, so that was good.
Okay, thank you. Jim, anything else? Thank you. Okay. Jennifer, do you have anything to report to us?
None today, thank you.
And board members, any comments? Yes,
Well,
Director Day.
I just want to say that, I'm still getting used to doing a tie and suit coat. It's amazing how they shrank just sitting in the closet. I don't get that. Yeah, something like that.
Welcome back, Cotter.
Yeah.
Mr. President,
Yes, Director Osborne.
for you folks that have been around a while, well, I was up in Idaho and had dinner with Larry and Kay Hull. They're doing just fine, and they wanted to say hello to everybody, and that they're doing just fine. They have a beautiful home, and we just had a marvelous visit. So they said to say hello to everybody, and if you're up that way, please call. ATHOL is a little community they live in. Okay?
Thank you. Any other board comments? All righty. We'll move on to the consent calendar. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent. Thank you, Director Anzini. Thank you, Director Day. Any other board comments on the consent calendar? All right. Any public comment on the consent calendar?
It does not appear at this time there are any members of the public wishing to comment on the approval of today's consent calendar.
Okay. Board members, please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move to information items and bring Dan back up to center stage. This picture's changed a little bit, hasn't it?
I think the water supply picture, not the actual picture. Yeah, understood. I'm following you. So I'm getting myself oriented. So I know there's gonna be lots of jokes this morning. So, okay. Well, it's that's what a great point, Director Day, and that's one of the things that our staff all last week. We had to treat this storm as it could be the last one until April, right? And so That's why we went into this knowing that we have to do everything we can to capture as much as we can. Things are so volatile right now, and obviously with the status of the canal, I'm doing everything we can to think long-term, and that's exactly what we did, so. And I did fail at the conclusion. I don't know if it really had a conclusion to my impromptu presentation, but I do want to make sure we recognize there's a lot of wet rain gear, a lot of tired staff, and they had a long night, and it's just important just to recognize all those staff and all the calls that our staff are going to get today here about what happened last night and is my water safe to drink, et cetera. So just another example of great staff at work. So. Okay, well, this was, at least before this weekend storm, a status of our water supplies and preparation for 2022. Slide 2, please. We were able to successfully, obviously, meet our demands this summer. Everything went as planned. I'd say probably even a little bit better than planned. We've now crossed our 2020 demand projections for both August and September. So you remember we were double digits higher this spring, or high double digits, 30, 40%. So we were right at a little bit below 2020 throughout the latter part of the summer. The Bureau of Reclamation was able to keep the reservoir a little bit higher than their minimum, which was great going into this, and I'll talk more about that. Really shows that there's a regional effort. Everybody's aware now that we're in a drought, and we've turned that ship. It takes a little while to turn a ship at sea, but we've been able to do that. We were anticipating ceasing hauling to Outingdale, and I'll explain why we have actually not done that. We are still continuing. I'll explain why, and I'll explain in a minute. That change is imminent, but we need to get through this weekend. And just, you only have 2 operators that operate Reze and Outingdale at the same time. Too many moving parts, need to make sure we make safe water.
At some point, maybe at our next meeting, you could bring a quick information item on the Outingdale hauling.
Yes.
How many loads, how many gallons, how much did it cost us?
Great.
Kind of stuff.
We're
Thank
happy
you.
to do that. And we're continuing to have that high likelihood of overall, I'll say overall, drier conditions. I know it seems a little ironic to say it today, but still overall for the winter, drier conditions. But then in the spring, hopefully get into typically more average conditions. Next slide, please. Okay, these were the numbers, which they're obviously changing by the hour, so I'm not going to focus too much on those. But just to kind of show relative percentage where we're at in our reservoirs here. Yes, that's why we put a date on it. Didn't anticipate such a change, but these were as of last Monday to make the board packet. I typically like to update those, but obviously I didn't get a chance this weekend. We have been able to gain a little bit more storage, so now our projection, we're thinking we're going to be about 800 acre feet higher under our most conservative projection. So maybe 16.6 by end of December. Obviously, we just gained another 800 feet last night, so that number will change again. So the good news is that red line, the slope should hopefully at least flatten out and hopefully start to increase. But for the most conservative planning efforts, we're still assuming that the driest of conditions. Next slide, please. And as I said, our demands have really stabilized. And we're down overall, which is good. You know, it's considering August and September are very high demand months. Those are really good months to be down. So that's really good. And we shouldn't really set aside what we did to support the effort to protect our community in the Caldor fire. We had 2 mobile retardant bases, hundreds of fire trucks connecting to our hydrants. And then when our canal was online, we gave them drafting points on a map to help protect our communities. So you can't really measure that directly. Because obviously we don't assign them a water meter for their efforts. But what we do know that even though that 10% of our customers were moved out of that region, our power plants area, our demand actually was the same or a little bit higher than before they left. So it kind of shows you the amount of water that we did to support the community. And this was, as of last Monday, we were trending even better, maybe 3-4%. Obviously with the rain, hopefully everybody's turned off their sprinklers for a long time. And we'll see even greater conservation by the end of the month. Next slide, please. I do want to just take a minute, and I know several board members have raised this in the past. I think it's mostly just for the benefit of the public, but just to take perspective of our conservation. Our customers have been doing conservation for many years. I know we talk about asking 15% from last year. But we've been saving for quite a while. And we went back to look at some of the records to kind of give a perspective of what that means. So the first thing we need to look at is, we're obviously, El Dorado Hills, western end of the county, is one of the fastest growing areas of the region. So our total district demand naturally is going to increase. So really, to look at consumption, you want to look on a per connection or a per capita basis. And so that's what we did. So we looked at this last dry year, 2013 versus 2020, individual homes, single-family residential connections. You see it in some of our higher using areas, those developments that had more irrigated areas, a 31% decrease in upper El Dorado Hills. So that's zone 1. So it's kind of Silva Valley Road to Bass Lake, kind of that area where you have more outdoor water usage. And then district-wide, it's everywhere from the county line all the way up to Pollock Pines, 10% decrease even before we asked for any conservation. So it's important to kind of look at that perspective. So district-wide, our customers are using 10% less than they did 7 years ago under similar hydrologic conditions between 2013 and 2020. We looked at 2019, just to be interested, and those numbers were 30 and north of 30, I think, for some areas, 28 and 34% or something. But just to kind of give a perspective of where that conservation, it's been happening for quite some time. So when we asked 15% this year, it's important to remember that we're already saving, kind of coming in. We're taking credit, for some of that conservation we're already doing. A lot of work went in 2014 and 2015.
Yeah, and I think this is a really, really important point for us to make, not just locally, but also, we don't want to discourage conservation. If you can conserve. And obviously down in the western part of the county, more landscaped yards and such, and so but a lot of people have changed a lot of things, and so that is serious conservation that's baked in already. And a concern or fear I have is that what happened last drought happens again, where we get this one-size-fits-all mandate from the state, and that doesn't take that into account. I do know Governor Newsom, way back when he first declared the drought emergency, acknowledged that there was already a lot of pre-existing conservation from the last drought. So I hope that he remembers that. It's more the State Water Board that I have some concerns about. So I think we should also talk to our other agencies and associations, and again, conserve if you can conserve, but I think we have to be prepared to push back a little bit if we get one of these one-size-fits-all sort of mandates.
Good point, Director Day, and I think also you can only change your shower heads once. You don't, every year changing the shower head doesn't gain another 15%, or you can only put so many bricks in your toilet. So I think that's a valid point that we need to maybe go back and look at our consumption by connection prior to the mandates, and then look at our current consumption by connection and see what that change has been.
That's great, thank you. And I know our consumption reports, and I think our CAFR also may have some of these long-term data sets that we can analyze some of that.
A couple questions, and maybe this is a stupid question. We have a recycled water program in the further west slope. Not everybody is benefactor. A question on the meter reading and the output, or the inflow and output in those hills that manage the 30%. How many, is that recycled water also counted?
This is looking only at the pot, so for the dual plumb customers, of which there's little,
Right.
maybe we broke 5,000, around 5,000. This is looking just at the potable side. So I only looked at specifically potable.
Only
When
the
we-
raw water?
Right, so when
Okay.
we do come back and give maybe a full long-term update, we'll also look at the recycled water residential use per capita demand.
Yeah.
But we're looking just strictly, since this is our, what our request is from our customers, what the state has requested of us, and what we hopefully don't want to get into a mandated conservation. We look just at the potable side, and then we'll separately look at the recycled water.
So it's separate, so, your calculations, your figures are, and quite frankly, a 30% reduction over the since the 2014 is really significant.
It is.
And kudos to the people on the west slope who have the large lawns and I remove my own lawn just to save the money. But, and then I put in new toilets and other things, irrigation system that is automatic and all that. So a lot of people have been doing that, to my knowledge, in my area. So that really is kudos to all of them who participated. And going as a representative for these water agencies, because I'm going to be attending the Mountain Water County thing on Wednesday or Thursday, I think it is. I want to be able to be smart if I make a comment, and make sure that the Mountain Water County water agencies are doing, or are a similar picture, so that when we look at the state water resources, we can argue, our small part to make sure that the state realizes that we are over our requirement of 15%. So
That's great.
I think overall, when you look at our customers, they're very good consumers, but they're also very smart about doing their part. And I think we need to make sure we let our customers know that. So that's something that our general manager should be doing. So anyway,
I
and
know
he does, I'm
He
sure.
always does, exactly. And
Yeah.
that is a great point, Director Enzine. I think you used the word smart, and I think it's important to remember, too, there's different ways to arrive at that conservation. You don't necessarily have to hardscape. We have our irrigation, IMS, our irrigation efficiency program. Maybe it's just watering more smartly. So our customers have got there in a lot of different ways. So I want to make sure it's clear we're not saying to everybody to take out your lawn. That's not how we've arrived at this conservation. It's just being smart. So. Right. Good. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and this is just a graphical illustration for our customers that may be listening. 2021 is that red line there, and the dark blue line was 2013. So you can see we really turned that corner much sharper than we did in 2013 when we initially got into that drought situation, the previous drought situation. And for our most conservative planning, we are still planning that dotted line in our projections. We're hoping that this current conservation trend will continue. Obviously, in October it will, and hopefully we get a little rain in November, December. But that is where, just for planning, where we expect to be. And that dash line is just that 15% conservation from 2020. Next slide, please. And these are the weekly updates that Brian's staff send to the state. And so since our drought declaration at the end of July, we are completely even as of mid-October. And obviously that number will only go, in this case, down. So less usage than 2020 as the year ticks on. Next, please. And about the same for Psych Water, just a hair little bit better. And I always like to show this. So this is a graphic provided by Regional Water Authority and so this is kind of the greater Sacramento County greater region, or say the greater Sacramento region, since inclusive of El Dorado County. You can see there, overall, they represent theirs on millions of gallons, but just the general trend is we're kind of following what our neighbors are doing, which is good. So, next slide. And this slide will now be a little bit dated, but so we did save about 800 acre feet over what we were thinking we might use in August, September. So that kind of goes into our savings account. So our latest projection was about 16.6. As I said, that did still assume a 5% greater, just for planning purposes. Demands are trending down. And at that point, we had no precipitation. We can scratch that clearly off this list here. But we continue to take the most conservative approach. And really, I swear I put this slide presentation together before this weekend. So our supplies are focused on debris mitigation. And clearly, the photo I got this morning showing all the logs of the Camp Creek diversion is testament to the exact issue right now.
And Dan, do we have, we approved the purchase of an excavator to station there at Camp Creek and clear the tunnel as the debris flows down. What's the status of that
Sure.
excavator?
So I'll give you the status excavator and the status of work, both. So we all read the newspaper about the strike at John Deere. Fortunately, that did not affect the plant where our excavator is being manufactured in North Carolina. It was in the other place we were all gonna take a road trip to up north. So that's still on schedule for mid-December. Starting early last week, all through the week, we had in total, probably on most days, almost 18 to 20 people there between CAL FIRE and our staff, clearing all the trees down to the road, improving that road, knowing that this situation might happen this weekend. We could put about 50 tons of rock on that road and getting it all ready to go down there. Those that have been able to take a tour down there, you know how steep that road is, and on a good day. So we've got that done. We're in the process of relocating our gauge house, which will allow the excavator to be staged. Hopefully that's gonna happen later this week if the road can dry out enough. So we do have a rental there now that we were doing work with, and if, to the extent that we can get to that, otherwise it's gonna have to be manual when it's safe, which is maybe a little while, so.
That's where we went. Thank you.
So really our main focus is keeping Camp Creek Tunnel clear. So starting November 1st, we can take our full 500 CFS through that. So I want to make sure just to get perspective of why that's the case. Our water rights for Jenkinson Lake, we could take about 3 times as much water through Camp Creek as we would typically be able to move through Hazel Creek Tunnel. Because we have about 15,000 acre feet to work with from the El Dorado Canal. We send 5 to Reservoir 1 water treatment plant during the summer. We could put 10, but I can't really put more than about 10. But we don't want to put more than about 10,000 acre feet. So, but for perspective, most of that water that we'll hopefully fill the lake with will come through the Camp Creek Tunnel, and that's why we're doing everything we can to keep that tunnel clear. So, and then obviously there's the indirect effect of any water we take to Hazel Creek Tunnel will obviously be less hydroelectric generation. So whenever we could take Camp Creek water, we do want to take that water. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'll try to move through these last couple of charts as quickly as I can here. So end of September, the minimum, absolute minimum that the Bureau had was 200,000 acre feet. They were able to beat that by around 30,000, which was trending in the right direction. And we're doing our part. We actually, as of writing this agenda item, we had used 0 Central Valley Water Project water this year. We've used only EID supplies at Folsom Reservoir. So that is a huge win for the district. To look at kind of, I wanted to look at statistics, how, if we're gonna get back to normal, what's normal anymore, but average conditions by January 1, we need about 250,000 acre feet. It's happened. In 77 and 78, when we had that really big storm, they gained 450,000 acre feet in those 90 days. We may be close to 200,000 acre feet by the time all this water comes off the hill. So that may be a huge welcome win. Now, it's not the cleanest water in the world, and we'll have to wait for the lake to settle out a little bit, but that may be one benefit of this very challenging weekend.
Probably premature, but any idea how much snowpack we got above Caples and?
It's fallen right now by the hour, Director Osborne. I don't have a update as of this
Yeah.
morning. I know
Well, get up there and find out.
they're up there. They're up there in snowcats right now,
Okay.
making adjustments. So,
Yeah, all right.
and hopefully they'll be able to safely make it back.
Well,
As you know, 150
unfortunately, if we get a big pack and we have the same repeat of 97, it all comes with a warm storm and it all comes down at once, and
Yeah.
that created all kinds of other problems.
Right, yeah, we don't like to talk about that situation,
Yeah.
but we're all completely aware, unfortunately, of that. And then I just want to reassure the board that we are maintaining those temporary barges at Folsom until we get comfortable that that lake is high enough that we, it's kind of like your rental equipment these days. You don't want to give something away and you might not be able to get back if you need it later, so. Okay, next slide. Okay, and we did actually anticipate last Wednesday, Thursday being able to stop hauling. We made the decision not to do that because what we thought might happen this weekend and did happen. We have the staff that managed the Reservoir A water treatment plant, which is, we call it the workhorse, so that's feeding everybody from Pollock Pines all the way down to Silva Valley Parkway, basically. That treatment plant does not like high turbidity, and normally you don't get high turbidity, but obviously with the storm, our staff were awake all night operating the plant last night. And we just couldn't afford to be diverting over to, no pun intended, to moving over to Outingdale to try to get that plant started under similar conditions. You remember about a third of that watershed was burned out. So, it's about when we release, when we're hauling the full 6 loads, it's about $1,500 a day. It's gonna be less than that right now because obviously customers aren't using, but just in the standpoint of doing everything we can to have safe, reliable water rese, we made the decision to defer starting up that plant. So all the filters have been qualified. We've gone through the process, but just didn't hit the button to make regulatory water yet. So we'll probably do that hopefully midweek this week. Nevertheless, we're on the edge of that, so we're still requesting as part of the resolution today to go ahead and move to Res 1. We're there, hydrologically we're there, we just want to make sure we can safely be there. And that stage 1 is consistent with the drought action plan. One thing I do want to note is now that the water rights have temporarily been, the curtailment's been lifted, there's no notification to the state board where we did have that increase in Park Creek. That no longer applies because the state board has, in recognition of the current conditions, has lifted that curtailment. So we were asked and moved Addingdale back to stage 1 consistent with the rest of the district's customers. Okay. So just real quick on this, Tracy presented this information in July, June or July? In July, end of July. We successfully met the blue is our potable supplementation. That is done. We are no longer supplementing potable water as of about a month ago. And we're meeting all of our recycled water demand with treated wastewater. We'll do that until mid-spring next year. Next slide. Just real quick on Jacobson Lake, obviously the lake too low to launch boats on the main boat launch, so we did close that, pulled the mooring facility out, which we normally do. We still have some dedicated fishermen and anglers and kayakers that still come and use the Stonebreaker boat launch. One thing that we were able to do is actually help PG&E with some of the remote area restoration. Since we're not needing our main boat launch, it typically uses a landing pad for emergencies by fire or emergency personnel. But we're able to accommodate them to use that as a staging area and helibase to do some remote area restoration from some of the restoration. Unfortunately, is going to take probably until January in some of the more remote areas. Next slide. Okay, I think this forecast held pretty tightly, so I think we'll just move on. Next slide. And they're still showing, next week or later this week, an increased chance, but I think fortunately we've all seen that after today, hopefully we will experience a period of drying, and we definitely need it for saturation purposes. Next slide. I think this is really an important, so we do get monthly updates from the CPC, the Climate Prediction Center. We've officially entered in La Nina, which was predicted, right? And that we expecting overall below normal precip for the winter and get to more average or neutral type conditions in the spring. I included these two slides. This is the one, or charts, the one on the bottom left is what I showed you in January, just to give perspective of kind of where we were last year. We're kind of starting out around the same point that we did last year, but we did not go above neutral conditions, which is the 0 degrees from departure of long-term average of ocean conditions. But so we're kind of setting up similar to last year is probably the best way to describe it. Okay, I'd like to just kind of close out last few years to talk about public outreach. This last one, we worked on indoor savings. And we went ahead and every time we have rain, obviously this last one, I think everybody's kind of aware that we need to turn off sprinklers. But even when we had those earlier small rain, just drop little reminders, hey, don't forget to turn off your sprinklers for the next couple days. And then you probably saw I saw on the news as well, the Be Water Smart campaign, the drought is back, just to kind of remind people. Unfortunately, the timing didn't quite work out. It's hard to say we're in a drought when we're flooded streets, but hopefully that will, once things dry out, we'll keep moving that forward. Next slide. And that is hopefully the last time we'll see Camp Creek Tunnel dry until next year. So that was taken about a week and a half ago when we were out there.
That's the input into Folsom Lake.
To Jacobson Lake.
I mean Jenkinson Lake, yeah.
Yeah. Very good.
Thank you. Any questions from the board? Okay, thanks.
Just a comment.
Yes, Director Anzini.
Thank you for the update. There is, you kind of touched on it, the last one, that the public outreach is so important right now. But, you know, most people, they're adults, they read right through it knowing that this is just a temporary storm.
Right.
So if you've lived here long enough, you understand that. But I think the most important thing is we embrace our positive parts of this whole thing. And so long as we continue the transparency and allow people to understand what we're doing on a, you know, week-to-week basis, it may sound a little heavy-handed, but we don't want to overwhelm them. But people want to know, and it makes it so much easier that we have that public outreach. And I appreciate all those emails we've been getting and the Facebook messages and Nextdoor. It's perfect, because I think it really does inform people. That's where we're all secluded in our houses, a lot of us. And
Right.
so that is a great source of information for people, and it's factual, and I really appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or board comments? All right, thanks, Dan. Oh, any public comment on this information item?
It does not appear at this time there are any members wishing to speak on information item number 8.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move to item number 9, information item number 9. Here we go. Capital Improvement Projects Workshop.
All right, good morning, Director Dwyer and members of the board. Yeah, this is our annual workshop for the Capital Improvement Plan, and this is covering year 2022 to 2026. And this is part of our annual budget development that we do every year about this time. Staff comes to the board with our capital improvement plan in a workshop format in September of this year's October. And then we come back for adoption of the plan, and then at that point, Mark begins to brief the board on our operating budget and how the CIP fits in with the operating budget and our financial plan. I always recap what some of the highlights of the last year for the projects that we've completed or ongoing. So as far as expenditures in 2021, the plan showed about $78 million of expenditures. It looks like, just from our projections, we'll be around that 73 million by the end of the year. That does include Flumes 4, 5, and 6, which are unplanned projects, not including the CIP, and the Flume 30 acceleration. So we plan for that one to be a 2-year, and that's going to be a 1-year. So most of those expenditures will be in 2021. Next slide. So this is a list of some of our, or most of all of our completed projects that were completed this last year, and I'll just go through the next few slides. I'll have just some pictures of some of these. Slide. This is the Flume 38 to 40 replacement, which we're wrapping up this year, about $11.7 million. This was a wooden flume, and you can, on the left, and you can see we've replaced that with that's the typical U-shaped canal that you've heard Carrie talk about many times. So one of the greatest features of this, along with just being concrete, is we've got really good access that we incorporate into these projects as well, where we didn't have that before. Next slide. We completed Pacific Tunnel improvements to remove a lot of this old wooden timber that was in the tunnel. This is a short section of tunnel along our El Dorado Canal. Next slide. Replaced the powerhouse roof, about $780,000 project. Next slide. A couple FERC license implementation projects. This was the Pacific Crest Trail Bridge that was completed. John Kessler managed this project and completed this past year. And then the next slide would be the Caples and Silver Lake East campground improvements, which were completed as well. On the wastewater side, we have an ongoing lift station upgrade improvement program. We completed the South Point lift station. This was a lift station in northern El Dorado Hills. Next slide. And then moving over on the water side to Outingdale, we essentially completed the intake replacement. I think that's probably, we're calling that substantially complete at this point. There was some minor work left to do, but this replaced both the booster pump station and the access. You can see we have a new set of stairs that are leading down to the river that makes it much safer, and a new pump facility just to the top of there. We've completed solar expansion at both El Dorado Hills and Deer Creek wastewater treatment plants, and those are online and running. We had a large pipeline replacement that leads into one of our largest lift stations in the Diamond Springs area, the El Dorado lift. We had, you can see the picture on the right, some pipe that wasn't completely round, and so that pipe has been replaced. Next slide. And then some of the projects that are still under construction include the Folsom Lake intake, Upper Main Ditch pipeline, Flume 30, Flume 4, 5, and 6. We've got a partnering project with Caltrans on the Camino Safety Project to relocate 2 of our pipelines that is ongoing. Also, Patrick briefed the board last meeting about the Reservoir 2 roof replacement. We are also implementing some battery storage installations at some of our pump station facilities. And these battery storage really would shave some of the peak power consumption off of these facilities by installing these batteries. We're working with Tesla with those. And then ongoing water service line replacements.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Going back to Tesla, how many batteries is that? And is there any future in using those Tesla batteries? What is it replacing? Gas-powered generators? Or
No, so and I don't know maybe if Elizabeth knows. Oh, she's throwing out numbers. We've got both water and wastewater facilities, so I don't know the exact
Okay.
number. But these are installations that essentially, remove some of the generator power when we're running off peak. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Good morning, Board. Elizabeth Dawson, Engineering Manager here at the district. So we have 8 sites that we're installing Tesla batteries at. We've got 4 water pump stations, headquarters facility, which hasn't been started yet. And I think Res A and Res 1 are the other 2 locations, and I think El Dorado Lift Station as well. The batteries at the water pump stations have been installed. The others are yet to be installed and connected. And so what they do basically is shave the peak power. So the batteries charge up during that peak power period and then discharge during the peak power. Sorry, I think I said that backwards. They pull power and charge up during non-peak power and discharge during peak power. So it saves us money in the long run. Those projects will save us, I think, about $7.5 million over the life of the battery installations. So
okay, and that's
pretty
over
good.
a 10-year period, or?
I believe it's a little bit longer than that.
Okay, and that's
Yeah.
from the solar panels?
No,
Not
those are
always.
just, so
Is-
the batteries are charged from the electric grid
Okay.
themselves
There you go.
and then discharged, yeah.
Okay, so we're not collecting anything to put into the Tesla like a resident does, like a residential hookup?
It's similar, actually. It's
Okay.
very similar. So it's a battery pack that's charged from the grid during non-peak and then discharged to operate our facilities during peak power. So we're not pulling the peak power to run our facilities during the peak power time frame.
Which is when the highest rates are.
Right, right. So you're saving on the rate revenue from that really high peak power during the 4 to 9 kind of highest peak power.
Okay, great, thank you.
A lot of the residential ones use the solar panels to back up the
Right.
Tesla batteries. In this case, we're using off-peak energy at a very low cost to charge the battery, and then that helps us reduce our costs because we're using the batteries for on-peak. But overall, it helps PG&E maintain a reliable system because they have difficulty in managing the peak, especially with the solar, the high supply of solar energy during the peak days. So we just get off that grid.
And I'd like to add too that Tesla, approached us with this program, and they were able to use. It's a CPUC funded generation program, and so the Tesla provided the batteries to the district at no cost. So it's quite a, great program for the district. And so, yeah, we're just looking to shave that peak revenue or peak power off of the demand side from our facilities.
Quite possibly, we'll just add this as an information item so we can show you in detail what's going on, including the adjacent empty parking lot over there will be a future charging station as we're being forced to convert to electric vehicles.
Yeah.
And generators.
Thank you. Yeah, and so just some of the pictures of where we're at with some of these ongoing projects. This is the Folsom Lake intake replacement. And it looks like completion or substantial completion and operational capability should be ready early 2022 for the Folsom Lake intake. And then the next slide would be Upper Main Ditch. So the Upper Main Ditch is going really well. That also, it looks like substantial completion and water conveyance going through our new pipeline early 2022.
I'd like to just highlight, if you think about that, I mean, the timing, it was a difficult project to get approved, but think about it in a drought. We no longer have whether it's 1,800 acre feet or 1,500 acre feet going to seepage and loss. Now that water will be 100% delivered to the treatment plant, really saving us for a drought supply.
And then this slide has some of our other ongoing projects, not so much construction, but more in the design realm or nearing construction. We've got condition assessments at our primary water treatment plants. We've got the permit 21112 change petition ongoing, hoping to get an EIR out for that project next year. Ongoing flume designs. We are out to bid with our wastewater collection facility relocation. We'll be coming back to the board, I believe, in December with the results of that construction bid, and hope to have that under construction next year. Also improvements to our penstock, some of our wastewater improvements like the WASDAF, echo conduit design, as well as just our ongoing replacement or upgrade of pressure reducing stations, water line replacements, and lift station upgrades. Next slide. So moving to some of the projects and the expenditures in the next 5-year plan that we've developed. Again, just as far as the process with developing this, our staff usually start working together to develop and prepare the individual worksheets in August of each year. We always meet with all the stakeholders to review each project and the funding estimates. I'll say our initial draft, I believe, was a little over $300 million when we first started working on the plan. It's been reduced by about $238 million. Is where the draft CIP stands right now. A lot of the projects, where that reduction comes from, it's not really. I wouldn't say it's really, well, we're just not going to do that project. A lot of it is just, well, we really don't know the full scope of that, so we're not going to include that construction cost yet. And I'll touch on some of those projects as we go through.
So the first cut is really the wish list that everybody puts together and say, if unbounded, what would you like to do to upgrade your facilities by each department? And then your team goes through each one and scrubs that wish list down into doable projects, and that's the $70 million difference or thereabouts. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
correct. Yeah, so there's always projects where, we really need to do this, but we really don't know the scope of it yet. Some of the capacity improvements that I'll talk about are some of those. There's also just a kind of more of a financial number or a target that we know that we just can't really afford that. There's also, from a staffing standpoint, we just can't do all those type of projects in this short amount of time frame. So there's 3 components, I'll say, that we're trying to manage through and trying to distribute those projects out as best we can.
Maybe I should rephrase that comment, because wish list sounds like Christmas Christmas things. And that's really not, all these things need to be done. It's just what's the timing to make them happen.
Right,
Thanks.
thank you. Okay, next slide. This slide just shows where the 2022 to 26 draft numbers at 238 million. That's the last row there, compared with our last two 5-year updates. So you can see it's a growing trend of some increased cost, but again, we're trying to manage that as best we can. And we also always have a target of actual expenditures achieving about 70–80% of the plan. Sometimes we do, or a lot of times we do probably better than that, but just as far as for financial planning, we'd expect about $165 to $190 million of expenditures over that 5-year period. This chart shows our historical expenditures in yellow compared with the projected expenditures in blue. And I guess the take home here is that when you're looking at just an average expenses over that time frame, which is the green line, we've seen slight increases in our annual expenditures over the next 5 years.
And maybe this is a question for Mark, but we have the authorized, what we approve as projects, and then we have the actual cash outflow. So we've authorized 30 million or so per year, but we only spend 20-ish, is that correct?
That's the one that varies. So like it looks like we're going to spend over 90% of what the board authorized in 2021. We try to target that at about 80% or 70–80%.
Okay.
So, there's always projects that are delayed for whatever reason, or we just reprioritize that throughout the year. So, at this point in time for 2022, our plan is, I think it was around 50 million for that first year in 2022. So we'll be targeting about 80% of those expenditures.
Thank you.
Ryan, are all the dollars on that 2021 dollars, even going back to the 2000s, were they all cost adjusted into 2021 dollars? Because that would actually be really useful, because I remember the days of $80 million, $85 million, $90 million 5-year CIP plans. And now we're looking at 238 million. Now, what would help would be, that's over a long time period. Construction costs have gone up significantly. I'd like for us to be able to look at that and compare apples to apples, so that it would maybe take a little of the edge off of my anxiety right now. But that would be useful when we bring this back, to be able to look at it in comparable dollars. And I'll have more later on.
Sure, yeah, we can do that.
So you're saying then that our $200 million today is the same as the.
Oh, I'm not saying that, but,
No,
but
It could be the same as the $80 million.
well, I
10 or
think it would
15
be
years
relevant
ago.
to be able to compare and take that chunk out, and so that the 240 million in today's dollars, maybe that would that would be 120 million, in a $90 million old $90 million CIP. I'm just curious. I think that would be useful. We are still accelerating our spending, and we're still accelerating the growth in the CIP, which is of great concern to me. And in particular, we get to, I think you have a slide coming up about the bond issuance, and those numbers get bigger and bigger too.
But Alan, I think your point's well taken, and it really is depicted by the yellow on this chart, that there were several years where we really underspent what we should have been doing to maintain the district infrastructure, and now we're playing catch-up.
Well, to give an even greater historical perspective, there were years before that dip where we overspent, and we still have infrastructure that is underutilized because we overspent. And then, yes, there was a period where where we could have probably spent more, you know, and this is, my argument is we need to find that middle ground, which some of this has, of trying to be more consistent with the annual expenditures, which makes it easier to manage, both financially and from a logistical standpoint. But I do get concerned that we're going to kill the goose that laid the golden egg. You know, there's in El Dorado Hills and Greater El Dorado Hills, Cameron Park and such, there's a lot of folks that move towards retirement, and then they're like, but I got to leave. Even though I love my home, I have to leave because I can't afford PG&E and EID here in retirement when my income is going to be more constrained. And we really need to be cognizant of that, at you know, at what point do you reach a breaking point of yeah, you're fixing things, but you're going to end up not having enough people to pay for it. People start cutting back on their water, which reduces our revenue further, which then forces us to raise rates more or borrow more. It's a really dangerous cycle that we are, I think, very close to. And so that's my big concern with this, and with the, you know, the $100 million of possibly borrowing. I mean, again, I'm not against borrowing, but it's a very large amount.
Just to refresh the board's memory, this last year, Dan in operations brought two proposals forward. One is $25 million of service line replacement, and the board approved that direction. And he also brought forward a $25 million transmission line replacement program, and the board thought that was a good idea. That's embedded in here. Another very large expense that is in here still, I believe, is the Sly Park intertie. Now, we haven't really talked about that. We'll do that today. But it just, for example, if that fire went about a mile west, Reservoir A would have probably been destroyed. And we have one treatment plant up country and one treatment plant down country, with no good intertie between the country reservoirs. And I believe that's a project the board really needs to consider accelerating, along with another one that will come up, Flume 46, as critical infrastructure that we need to really address sooner than later.
I'm glad you brought that up, Jim, because I was going to bring that up. I'm very concerned that we need to accelerate that, and I'll bring that up during that piece of the discussion.
Okay, we'll go to the next slide. Okay, yeah, so this is now moving into the flume discussion. We were asked to take a look, especially with this last fire, at what our flume priorities are, and maybe there are some projects that we should accelerate just for that risk factor of a future fire. And this table summarizes the remaining wooden flumes that we have in the district. You can see there's several of them. I think it totals about 7,600 feet of wooden flumes still remaining in our system. In 2020, we did a condition-based prioritization assessment. So you can see that condition score there, with 10 being the worst and 1 being the most best condition. So you can see we've got about 4 to 7 in the 9 to 8 category there. And then the last column shows where those flumes are sitting right now in our CIP. And so you can see in 2022 to 23, we've got Flume 45, a couple different sections of Flume 45. The board has already awarded some design contracts for some of the smaller sections of these condition scored 9 and 8s, as well as we're also working on Flume 48, which is a somewhat larger section of flume that's also in our plan.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Just a question. Flumes 4, 5, and 6. They're no longer on the priority list, huh?
Yeah, almost, although I was thinking of that, we probably should still have flume 4 on the list, because as we'll discuss in I think the last item, flume 4, which we're replacing now, we're gonna leave a section of that in with wood. So there should still be a flume 4 on this list.
Okay.
Small section of wood. But,
One of the strategies as we're dealing with the fire remnants is instead of doing it based on how degraded they are, what's the highest risk of failure and how can we prevent that from impacting water supply really from Pollock Pines to El Dorado Hills? So as Brian is indicating, we're rethinking, don't necessarily replace it just because it's end of life, replace it because it's a potentially higher risk. If you look at Flume 46 there, 3,339 feet, if that were negatively impacted through a fire or something else, that'd be very, very, very difficult to replace in a timely manner. So I understand the bond is higher, and it may even be higher depending on what the risk tolerance is of the board. But by eliminating the high-risk potential flume sections and replacing those with concrete or siphon would help minimize our future risk for our customers. The small ones, 100 feet here or there, we can get back in there pretty quickly and replace them. So we're really taking a different look at this for risk management.
yeah, and so the next few slides are kind of more visually show that. I'll go through some of these maps, and I know that some of the font is hard to see here, but I've got these sections separated out based on each beat of our canal system. So this is the one beat, and this is where the fire primarily went through here. And you can see, thank you, Jennifer. This is flume 4, 5, and 6 right here in the middle. So we're addressing those. So we've got in this section flume 2, 2A, and 3. And then on the downstream side, we've got flume 13, which will be our remaining wooden flumes. These, again, like as Jim mentioned, they're pretty small sections that are pretty accessible. And also the condition of these are 4s, so they're pretty good condition. So given their condition and their ability to access these flumes, we're not proposing to accelerate any of these flumes other than what we're doing with flume 4, 5, and 6. The next section is downstream of the tunnel. This is the 3 beat, and you can see right at the top here, this is flume 30, which was destroyed, that is currently under construction. And then moving down, we just replaced flume 38 through 40 here. Flume 41 was replaced with concrete fairly recently, as well as flume 42. Flume 42 is wood, but it's essentially brand new. It was replaced in 2014. We had a condition assessment at the time, that a really alarming condition assessment that caused us to go in and replace flume 42 with wood, just because that was the material that we can replace that with as soon as possible. So the good news, though, with that one is that the access is great with that one. So if, again, from a risk standpoint with a fire, this one could be easily replaced if that were to occur. And then moving a little bit farther down the road, flume 44 has been replaced with concrete. And then you get into flume 45. So that you can see this is a pretty long section, about 1,900 feet. We've broken it out in our CIP into 3 different sections. One section was replaced in 2014 along with flume 42. We've got in our CIP to replace what we're calling the abutment section in 2022. And then there's a longer section, which we're calling section 3, that's also in our CIP in the next couple years. So if everything goes well, flume 45 should be in pretty good shape as far as access and with reconstruction within the next 2 to 3 years. And then the next one is the tough one that we just mentioned, flume 46. So flume 46 over 3,000 feet in length. You can see there it's kind of in a draw there. what we're looking at or what we want to look at, instead of just looking at replacing, you know, in kind with concrete, it looks like it's a candidate that we can run a siphon from one end to the other, or maybe even a tunnel. We're going to look at different options that, instead of just replacing this straight with concrete. You know, with over 3,000 feet, this is probably like a $50 million project to replace this whole thing with our, yeah, with our concrete. So we'll look at different options like a siphon or a tunnel that might work a little bit better there.
When we're talking about different options, and the risk is mainly from the support structures burning in a fire, being wiped out by a landslide, why don't we, I'm sure you've considered it, why don't we use steel support structures as opposed to wood? And then if the flume itself was destroyed, you could go back fairly quickly and reline it or do whatever you need to do. Have we looked at steel support structures instead of, and the downside is?
The downside with steel, well, it depends on the site with everyone. A lot of these sites, they're really not have that elevated thing. They're more on a bench type of thing with these rock walls. But to use an example like Flume 4, we've got a section of that which is an elevated wooden structure. We did look at replacing that with steel, but I believe just the cost and the material availability for steel was a limiting factor. Where in some of these, if we have the time, we can just build them up with a MSE wall, like we did with the picture I showed with Flume 40. Which is it's competitive cost-wise, and then obviously long-term, it's better to have a bench with a wall than
Right, certainly the MSE walls are better because they provide access, as your earlier photograph showed. I'm just curious.
I've had that question.
Yes.
But so, and I'll thank you. In long-term planning, it might be more doable to do the steel, but obviously for these emergency repairs, getting the materials was near impossible.
Right. If it was a normal outage, I would say that we would always be looking at the MSE wall alternative. Not to just take out the steel structure, but if we've got the time, I think the MSE wall is the way to go.
Yeah.
Because it's not any difference. It might be even cheaper from a cost standpoint to do. And then just long term, it's better to have that than an elevated structure ongoing. So back to 46. So this is the one flume that we've accelerated in our plan. At least right now, there's no construction dollars in our plan for flume 46. We've just got some money set aside to start evaluating this for what that option would be and what the timing would be to replace flume 46. And then moving farther down, this section is just a few really small sections of flume here that are in various stages. So I believe all three of these we've got under design contract. The board approved a design contract to replace these. So these are in the category if they were ever, if we ever lost one of these, we could easily go in and replace it fairly quickly. And then the last section here, this is starts with flume 48. This is the one where we're looking, this is about 400 or 500 feet of wooden flume. We're looking at an alternative to build a tunnel to bypass this or to replace it with concrete. So that's in the CIP, and I believe we have construction slated for 2026 for that flume. And then moving on down the line, another short section, flume 42 or 52 and 52A. So summary and just getting back to the table I showed, we believe with the exception of flume 46 that our prioritization and how we're spacing out these flumes and as far as the replacement plan is good, and the flume 46 is the variable that we'll be looking at, and that may accelerate in our plan going into next year. Okay. The other is a hard transition from flumes to the water system capacity replacements, but the other topic that was widely discussed as we developed the plan was looking like we're going to need to start looking at capacity improvements in our system fairly soon. As Dan mentioned in his presentation, it's kind of a strange thing where our annual consumption numbers have been going down with the drought, but we're at the same time we're seeing in our transmission system during like during a heat wave, we've seen increasing demands that we're trying to manage through operations in our transmission and our storage facilities. So we have a master plan update scheduled in 2022 that we'll be looking at this. The two main facilities that we'll be looking at that are of concern right now are the Diamond Springs main and the El Dorado Hills water treatment plant. So what was happening, looks like in the Diamond Springs main with the flows is just, during a heat wave, we start losing storage along that reservoir and the recovery wasn't what we wanted, which just means that either we need more storage or we need more capacity in our system. And then El Dorado Hills water treatment plant, the peak summer demands are going up there and starting to near the capacity of our water plant. So again, those will be looked at this next year and then plugged in as far as any improvements in the next go around with our CIP. I showed this at one of our last meetings, just from graphics. You can see we have our Reservoir 1 and Reservoir A water treatment plants, which we have capacity there. And so just looking at Reservoir A, water is flowing down the Pleasant Oak main, going west, and then once it hits into Diamond Springs, that's when we start seeing some capacity improvements that may be needed to get down into that water down into Cameron Park and El Dorado Hills. And then in the plan that was always there was just an expansion from where we're at 19.5 million gallons per day for El Dorado Hills, expanding that to 26. And then going back to flumes now, I should have put those two slides in a different spot, but too late now. But we've got flume replacement for flume 45 that we've talked about in 2022 to 2026, about 14 million. So those are two pictures of flume 45. This is flume 46. So it's tough to see the length of this from here, but this is the upstream side of flume 46, and flume 46 winds back through the canyon here and then comes back around to this way. So it's a really long section, and we're looking at bypassing that with possibly a siphon, on the right side of the picture here somewhere. Water line replacement projects, about 22 million for water line replacement. Two specific projects are Four Bay Road and Drop Off Road. These are in Pollock Pines area. And then we've got about $5 million annually from 2024 and beyond for future projects as well. Service line replacement, about $26 million. Replacing all of our polyethylene services over time. We've got about $5 million plugged into the CIP on an annual basis for our crews to address these.
So those two items, the 5 million for the transmission line and the 5 million for service line replacement, are really kind of discretionary in terms of will of the board. Do we want to delay those or smooth them out to be $1 or $2 million a year? Can you buy anything really for 1 or 2 million? Or do we want to suffer, if we delay those projects, then we suffer the unplanned emergency breaks in those lines that could be more than $5 million to fix. So that's kind of the dilemma we face, is how do we keep our costs low to our customers, and yet maintain the system so that it provides dependable service. And that's really kind of where we
That's
are.
the balance, yeah. Yeah, these are all reliability projects. These project affect the reliability of our customers with outages or leaks?
Actually, I think it's probably, the one thing that I'm concerned about is by postponing any of this, and you mentioned it earlier, it's gonna cost you more to repair something. And this is 1/3 of our constituency that need to have these main lines treated. And you just can't all be uphill. There's a great deal of population that are suffering. Their houses are 32 to 45 years old. And I think we've identified that that is a main area that needs to be concentrated on to the benefit of those property owners that are, I get phone calls and then I end up calling, the headquarters regarding, why was my how come my water was turned off? Or why is there a water running into this area? So, it's complex. And an irrigation district or a water company, this is the main thrust, to make sure that clean, safe water is coming to our customers. If majority of the customers down the hill are suffering repair, or our district is suffering to have to repair those on a priority or a level 3 hazard, you got to take care of this right now, that we need to be cognizant that, yeah, we're replacing the flumes, that's where the water's coming from to get down to those homes. But those homes, old pipes need to be replaced, not the homes, but the streets. And yeah, I think it's really important. That's all part and parcel of being a board of director here. You're 20% of the vote, but we also represent certain areas that need some kind of work also. So, I'm just coming from my own point of view and who we need to also be concerned about. It's very expensive.
And I think last year, we more or less put down the direction that we want to do planned replacement on these connections as opposed to emergency replacement, and the staff responded by providing a planned replacement schedule for the service lines.
Thank you. Okay, and then just covering some of our other larger projects in the plan, Silver Lake Dam replacement. This is in the next 5 years, a design environmental permitting exercise. We have told FERC our schedule for this project with construction in 2027. So we'll try to maintain that schedule as best we can.
And I was going to ask about that, because this is a FERC resource, and they did mandate that we fix it. And so that's kind of beyond the board mandates, is if we're going to maintain our FERC license, we're going to have to do this. Thanks.
Yeah, both FERC and DSOD are concerned about this, as are we, but we've got to go through the process with various studies and license amendments that we just went through with 4-Bay, so it's everybody knows it's an extended path to get to construction of this. On the wastewater side, the wastewater collection facility relocation is slated for 2022. As I mentioned, we're out to bid with that right now, and we'll be receiving construction bids soon and coming back to their board for a recommendation to award that contract. Wastewater lift station upgrades, we've got about $10 million in the 5-year plan for those ongoing replacement or upgrades of lift stations. Indian Creek lift station is at the top of the list, I believe, for 2022. And then we also have wastewater pipeline replacement of about $16 million. Completing the town center force main, which is in El Dorado Road. The mother load force main, we really need to start paying more attention to that. We really haven't had a mother load force main replacement done in several years. This is a AC pipe, same as town center force main, that's prone to failure from hydrogen sulfide gases. So we've got several sections of the mother load force main that I think we've shown the board in previous presentations that we've tried to phase out over the years, and we're trying to keep going with that program. Strolling Hills sewer line is a sewer line that needs to be upgraded in the Cameron Estates subdivision. And then we've always got annual collection system, pipeline rehab, lining type projects that would come to the board, and we will continue to do that on an annual basis, just to maintain the reliability of our wastewater systems. We also have general district category of projects. This is where we have our Hampton 7 upgrade, vehicle replacement, and various replacement of our IT infrastructure. Is in this
Can we
program.
back up to the collection system for a minute? Because one of the items, I think, was replacement of a pipe that was under capacity. Tracy, where was that exactly? In the details of the, I can't find it going back to each individual sheet, but it seemed like there was an area where the existing capacity of the collection main was not sufficient to meet the demand.
I think that's the case in Strolling Hills and Silva Valley. We have another CIP that we haven't discussed yet, but which is another capacity improvement type of project.
Right.
We have a sewer line, large trunk sewer lines in Silva Valley Road that take wastewater from north of Highway 50 down to El Dorado Hills plant on the south side of Highway 50. So there's a parallel sewer line that's been identified that we've modeled, and
Isn't there another one in Cameron Park that's insufficient? I see you shaking your head.
could be, yeah, I think it's Strolling Hills is the
Oh,
one
okay.
that I mentioned in Cameron
Okay.
Estates. It's got a capacity
Thank you.
deficiency.
And that change in capacity is to meet current demand. It's not building out for future developers or any of that sort of thing. It's just,
Yeah, those are existing
Just wanna
issues
make
where
that
we
clear.
see surcharging in manholes, and, it's
Right.
kind of a spill threat that we're trying to address.
thank you.
Okay, if there's nothing with that, we'll move on to the financing section. So I've got a couple of slides on financing, and there'll be more to come as we go through this at the next meeting. But this is how we're gonna pay for all this type of slide. So we've got the 2020 bond issuance that has been completed, and that paid for Folsom Lake intake, main ditch, and flume replacement. So those expenditures have pretty much all been accounted for. And so we've talked at the last CIP go around about this time last year about a projected 2025 bond issuance. At that time, it was about a $75 million planned issuance. As we looked through this preliminary, through the CIP, and looking at our revenues and our FCC, anticipated FCC revenues as well as debt payments, we believe we would need about a $100 million bond issuance, as Director Day mentioned. At this point, we think most of that money would be spent on either flume replacement, the slab arc intertie, which is also included in here, could be some other large projects in our water system as well. The Silver Lake Dam replacement that I mentioned, I think that's probably a little bit too far out to include with the 2025 bond issuance. So that could be a separate one a little bit down the road. And then what I don't know exactly the timing of these, but the capacity improvements that I mentioned along the Diamond Springs Main, El Dorado Hills, and the Silver Valley sewer line that we just mentioned are other large projects that fit the mold of a financing through a bond issuance. The next slide, again, looking at the overall expenditures of that between 165 to 190 million. Again, those large projects included with that would be funded by the bond proceeds. We also rely on annual revenue for PAYGO, and then the FCC revenue that we anticipate. So we'll be incorporating all that in the next couple of weeks, coming back to the board with both the CIP wrap-up for adoption, as well as have more definition on the financial plan and how the CIP rolls into the financial plan. What I didn't mention, we're also looking at grants. We came really close on flume replacement, on flume 30 replacement. We applied for a hazard mitigation grant, converting from wood to concrete as a hazard mitigation for fire. Came really close for that. we weren't accepted, and then and we had the fire that destroyed it. It was just ironic, so.
Did you do that on purpose?
Yeah, really, yeah. So I would think that as we go forward, we would be in really good line to be approved for future flume replacement under that FEMA Cal OES hazard mitigation program. Exactly, yeah. As well as there's a lot of money coming out in the future for drought and reliability type of projects, and we think Sly Park Intertie is a good candidate for that. So we've tried in the past, and we'll continue to apply for projects like that for future grants. So hopefully we'll get some of those grants that will offset some of the funding needs in the next 5 years. So the next step, any other further revisions, we'll go back as staff and look at this and sharpen our pencils a bit more if there's anything that we can identify in the next week or two. As I mentioned, we'll be working with finance on the financial forecast with the CIP, and we'll be both coming back to the board on November 8th for both CIP adoption and the operating budget financial forecast workshop. I think that's all. Thank you for listening and going through this. Any other questions or comments?
And thank you. It's, yes, Mr. Director Osborne. Almost.
Couple things. Going back a few years when we entered into the agreement with all the environmental groups about to get our license, our FERC license, where the estimated cost at that time was about 10 million. Well, that has been far surpassed in the last few years. I know that some of these things are an ongoing monitoring and analysis thing, but, and don't get in a big rush to do this, but Jim, could we get a cumulative cost coming down the road of what we've got to pay for this thing? Because it's getting to the point where it's hardly worth even running the power plant and getting $6 to $8 million revenue, and we're paying all of this money out for this thing. Now, again, I know there's monitoring that we've agreed to do and all that stuff, but that's enough of that.
Well, George, I just want to be clear. What are you asking for?
Just analysis on how much more money we're gonna spend on
FERC issues?
FERC issues, outside of the monitoring which we agreed to do,
The capital side then?
yeah, capital issues.
And I just remind the board, or George, this is a water supply
I
project with
understand,
ancillary
but-
power generation benefits that I'd
But
really not,
believe me, I understand.
I want to raise water rates of $3 million to replace the
Well,
power revenue.
we're spending on, I just want to get I think the board needs to know how much more money we're spending on this thing. The other thing is I wanted to bring up is the Sly Park Intertie. This is a critical piece of our infrastructure, and Jim alluded to this earlier, that if we'd have lost Res A, we'd have been in real trouble. Now, we don't know where this is gonna go, but there's a potential of a big national, federal infrastructure bill, and I would think that that would be I'd like to have that. I know the engineering department has nothing else to do with all this other stuff going on, but we need to have that as a shovel-ready project to hit the deck. If we can't get a grant outside of that, would be something that we could do right away. And if you guys concur, the analysis and the engineering could be done, and the bidding could be done rapidly to get that done. And how this is all gonna transpire on the federal level, we don't know, but it looks like they're getting close to a $1.8 to $2 trillion infrastructure, and for the district, that's a critical piece.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Director Osborne. I think that certainly the infrastructure bill, we have many candidate projects, including Silver Lake Dam could be one.
Sure.
I mean, and the water main distribution collection system, all of those need to be on the radar that says, okay, when the opportunity comes, we need to take advantage. I'm sure that staff is looking at that closely. So.
I suspect that recycled water is gonna be a big issue too. And so we need to look at those. But I think in the general district, overall protection of the water supply, the intertie is probably right on top of the list to get. So, but the recycle issues are gonna be there, right on top of the list too.
The
Just
other
wanted to
comment
comment
about,
on Director Osborne's two comments, but just going back to FERC, I think that's a really good news story. I mean, yeah, the expenditures have been more than probably what we had planned back then, but we are essentially complete with all the large projects, except for the Silver Lake well that's in the CIP. We've got about $1 million to spend
Well, I
to
remember
install the
going
well, but it is going
Meeting
forward a
with the
lot of just monitoring.
John Berry was the forest superintendent, and the original projection was $40 million, and I sat and over a glass of good El Dorado wine in my front room said, we can't do this. I mean, it doesn't make any sense, and we pared it down to 10 million. Well, I think we're fast approaching 20, so, but anyway, you understand the
Wrap all
drift of
that.
what we do. I'd like to have I think the board needs to know what we're doing there.
and
And on
and
the
the
Slab
FERC
Park intertie as well, we've got money set aside for design, environmental permitting to get that shovel ready in the CIP.
Okay, yeah.
Director Anzini?
I agree with Director Osborne on this because we've been harping on this one for about 8 months. That money is going to be coming here. It's just a matter of whoever's got the chutzpah to vote for that at the federal level. And I just want to remind everybody that we have something on the shelf ready to say, we're applying. And that's, I think, what Director Osborne's trying to say. I've been saying that it is ready. Here it is, and let's go. Because the issue of climate change is going to be impacting, it has impacted us, and in many ways, and we have to look at climate change funds, we have to look at infrastructure funds, and all of these things will be coming down. It may take 3 or 4 years before it even is delivered to our pocketbook, but we have to be ready with these projects and lobbying with our representatives to support us. And it doesn't matter what party it is, the infrastructure part is so important across the country, especially here too. And we're probably one of the biggest states that has the most clout. And if we're prepared and we're ready, and as an agency prepared and ready, and I know that our legislative representatives are doing something, but we need to be together on this whole thing of infrastructure and have it ready. Others are already ready. I've gone to a couple of conferences, and many agencies, water agencies, have their projects ready to present. And East Bay Mud's got them online, and we've got the Los Angeles Department. You got big water companies that are already right there with their receipts and saying, we're ready for this, and we've needed this for a long time. So, granted, we're a smaller agency, but we need to be in front of that group for our little piddling amount of millions of dollars that we need. So it's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
You can get it back, Director Osborne.
I think there's a couple important points here. This is a workshop for the capital improvement plan. And we also need to talk about Director Day's comments about our customers and their ability to pay the bills. And the fact that we've done, I think, some very smart financing through the bonds, catching those bonds at the lowest rate, refinancing our existing bonds to save a significant amount of cash outflow. And that's really the number that matters, is what is our cash outflow to service the debt, which impacts the ratepayers. It's not the size of the bonds, it's how much do we have to pay to service that debt. No, 2 cents worth. There you go. Coming back at you. So the bottom line of this workshop is, as a presentation to the board, and we are the decision makers on this, is if we collectively, or if board members individually want to reduce the amount of the bond financing in the future, which projects are you going to eliminate or defer? So I will say it's incumbent on each one of us to come back next meeting when we approve the CIP, to have your suggestions ready. Yes, Director Day.
I'll respectfully disagree. I will be most interested to see the CIP financial forecast integration, how this potentially could impact things as we go forward. What are we able to do pay-go versus what's going to create a time bomb that creates another round of very large rate increases. And so I'm very curious to see that. To mitigate that, I am also interested in seeing us look at 2021 dollars, past versus present. I think that would help a little bit as to look at that. And as far as the picking projects, we've had this debate, the board here, for 10 years about that. That's his job. Our job is to manage the finances and represent the ratepayers and also take into account what they can bear. And so that's where I'm coming from. He manages the projects. So.
But they're intertwined.
Yeah,
I
but
mean, they're
ultimately,
not-
we have a fiduciary duty and a duty as elected representatives to take what our ratepayers are able to bear into account.
So I guess we could approach this from a different direction and say, okay, ratepayers, you can bear 20 million a year in capital projects, 30 million. What's the number? And then give staff that number.
That is commonly how boards work, yes. We manage the big numbers and represent our constituencies, and then they have to go in and slice and dice. And sometimes they give us choices, a lot of times they don't, but yeah, that's how I view it.
So then I would ask each of the board members to be prepared to provide a number for capital improvement recommendations to the fellow board members and to the staff, and say, what is it that we're willing to fund in capital improvement per year for the next 5 years? And let the staff prioritize within that funding limit.
Well, Mr. President, it's a balancing act, as you all know. How much should we be repairing? How much should we defer? What our customers can afford? I know one thing they cannot afford is being out of water. Now, certainly the sky's not falling, although it's sure burned up a bunch last few months. What staff is prepared today is our recommendation going forward to maintain a reliable water system and wastewater system. And yes, there's a price tag with that. If the board says, no, the price tag's too high, we can certainly whittle it down, but there would be consequences. And there would be consequences, maybe not today, nor not tomorrow, but down the road, and we'll have to deal with that. I've been here 12 years, and I remember reading articles back in 1999, where the board says we have a $240 million CIP deficit, and we need to fund it, and no one wanted to fund it. And we've been playing catch-up ever since. I certainly respect Director Day's comments on financials. I respect the rest of the board comments on the need for an adequate CIP to prevent more interruptions of service, and it's a balancing act, and we'll look forward to a spirited dialogue, come to conclusion, and we'll move forward.
I think it's important also to point out that all the projects on the list, on the potential project list, I don't think you went below priority 1 or 2 on any of those projects. And priority 1, refresh me, is health and safety
Regulatory requirements, yeah.
and regulatory requirements. And priority 2,
Priority 2 are the end of life cycle reliability type of replacements.
and those are the only projects, I mean, there's a whole more big, long list of potential projects that are not in the CIP funding at this point.
Yeah, typically, I don't know the exact percentage, but yeah, we're talking high 90s where they're either a category 1 or 2
Right.
type of project.
I think a great example, though, what's in the CIP is the intertie. It's 26 million all in, I think, at least our estimate today, and with steel prices and concrete prices, you never know. But for us to move forward, we need at least adequate funds in there to do the design and engineering work. So it is shovel-ready, but the price tag, if the board wants to move forward, is the construction costs. The board can always make that decision once it's engineered. And we have an engineering construction estimate at that time in 2024, 2025. The board could say, you know what, we just can't afford that now. I'm glad it's engineered. We're going to postpone it a year or two. So some of these projects we want in there so that we're in a good position for grants or ready to move forward. And as each year we look at this and you can determine when we need to. Do we need to make the decision today that we're going to do a $100 million bond? Not really, but we wanted to share with you the consequences potentially if we do all this work. And potentially it is a lot of money, but the board can make those decisions this year, next year, following year.
Thank you. And even next meeting, when we approve the CIP, that does not mean we approve the bond issue. No. Okay. And all of the bonds for these projects that are listed are already in place. And we're just using the funds that we have in escrow, I guess, to complete these projects we approved in the past. Thank you. It's a big number. It's a tough decision. It has a major impact on our rates and customers, and it has a major impact on health and safety and reliability of fulfilling our mission. So it's a tough decisions. Thank you very much. Good
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you.
Any other board comments? We hashed that one out pretty good. Any public comment on this information item?
It does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to comment on the 2022-2026 Capital Improvement Plan Workshop.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to action items. Action item 10. Warrant register, paying the bills. Okay, thank you, Director Osborne. Thank you, Director Day.
And I will recuse myself, please.
Thank you, Director Veracamp. Any board comment? Any public comment?
President Dwyer, does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 10.
Thank you, then please vote. Or not vote.
Knock, knock. Director Osborne. Division 1, 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item 11, authorizing the purchase of materials for flume, I'll say repair,
Yes, it's
potential repair.
potential repair. We would like to increase our storage, but let me go through the presentation, short presentation, talking about flume material that we'd like to buy for Project 184. What you're looking at right here is a slide taken in 1997 after a significant storm in the area where the Cleveland fire took place in 1992, 5 years previous to that. And I'm Dan Gibson, the hydroelectric manager for the district. Thank you. So quick background, El Dorado Canal is 22 miles long. It goes from Kybers diversion facility from the South Fork of the American River over to the canal. In the canal, it does supply 1/3 of the district's water supply portfolio. It does contain 21 concrete flumes and 19 wood flumes. That's including the ones that are being adjusted right now, being switched over from, that were burned up from the Caldor fire. If you add up the length of all the 19 wood flumes, it comes up to 9,200 feet. So the wood flumes, as you know, there's a risk of damage from wildfires, tree falls, rocks coming down the mountainside and hitting the flumes, and also mudslide damage. In addition, there are also canal breaches that cause problems. So there's quite a few things that can cause repairs on a wood flume. So we think it's necessary to go through and maintain our inventory of the components to make repairs on these wood flumes and do reconstruction in the event of in the event of damage. Next slide. So the district maintains warehouse inventory of flume material to address scheduled and unscheduled replacement. We are looking to increase the amount of flume material from 400 feet to 800 feet. We'd like to double it, and we would keep it in this warehouse. And the idea is we would want to be able to go through and address any type of issue without having to go through a contract or contractors and be able to do this with staff. Flumes are constructed of custom milled and treated lumber. It's specialized lumber. It takes anywhere from 12 to 16 weeks to receive it once we order it. We'd like to go through and try to fast track this order that I'm requesting right now for another 400 feet. The idea is we'd like to increase what we have in stock, at the same time go through and replace what we're using to make the repairs on Flume 4, which is going to be happening here in the next couple weeks. Any results will result in water supply interruption and also lost hydroelectric revenue. On the left picture, you can see what Flume 4 looks like today. Of course, it was impacted by the Caldor fire. It ended up burning probably approximately 50 feet of the wood flume. The rest of the flume is in good shape. You can see from the substructures on the right, they are not all burned up. So our plan is to spend about 3 weeks in going through and replacing this section. We do have the skills in-house, and we have the materials where we can do this in a short period of time. The other option, if you want to go to the next slide, please, is if we tried to replace it with concrete. And of course, we like concrete better than wood, but as far as the time frame that we have to go through and complete this project, this would extend it a month later if we were to go with a concrete canal. Instead of us being able to run water on, well, in the middle of December, we'd be looking at the middle of January. As I said, we like concrete, but there's not every circumstance is correct for a concrete flume. Next slide, please. This is just some additional damage from the Cleveland fire back in October of 1992. Just gives you an idea as far as the potential hazards to a wood flume section. This is a flume that district staff replaced in 2014. It's Flume 45. We went through and did the substructure on the left, and then installed the cedar boards on the right. Cedar boards is what actually touches the water, and they swell up and prevent the boards from leaking. So my request to the board is option 1, to authorize funding in the not to exceed amount of $150,000 for the purchase of additional flume material for Flume Material Project 184, capital improvement, plan project number 21069.
Move one.
That was quick. Thank you, Director Osborne. Thank you, Director Verkamp. Any board question or comments?
Just a question about the I know it's managing risk, basically, is of trying to, well, do we do what we can do the fastest? Because if it turns out that January is a horribly wet month, then if we went with the concrete in the walls, we'd be stuck. So the wood's faster, but we also have potentially very dry winter here.
Exactly.
And the concrete and the walls will last, have lower long-term risk and will last much longer. So I mean, have you guys had those discussions about, it's a month, potentially dry, what's pros and cons?
And coming out of a critical dry year, we know the potential's there that it could happen again, although this most current storm, it's encouraging to see the atmospheric river. We try to go through and make decisions based upon what's the best option at the time. And with the ability to go through and get the canal running again mid-December, we have water and storage that we can use and go through and feed our water treatment plants, get hydrogeneration 1 month earlier, and we go through and make that evaluation every time we do a flume.
Okay, thanks.
I think there's another component to that too. I saw Kara coming up. One is speed. The other point, if you go back to well, it's not on there. There's a section of flume that wasn't damaged. And since we're going to be going to the insurance company for recovery, my expectation, that section they wouldn't cover in costs. So the decision was made to just repair that, and then they replace the two ends of that elevated section quickly. So that was also factored in, is the cost recovery. Carrie, did you have anything to add since you were leading that charge?
I would just add one thing. Carrie Muchler, senior engineer for the district. That 1 month time frame is an estimate. We also looked at the weather patterns that we've had over the last few years, and last year we got lucky. We were able to work until the first week in January, and after that we were done. And so that's the risk that we start really looking at, is when do we really start seeing the weather? And we got surprised with this storm, how big it was. That's going to give us, we're going to be a week delay with just this storm already before we can get back in to start working the sites on 4, 5, and 6. And, if somebody could hand me a crystal ball and predict the weather, you know what? Great. We can all be millionaires in a short amount of time and get these things done in a timely manner. But with that decision, it was, to go back to wood right now is just to get that water back into Sly Park and everything. And it's engineered. Can we go back to the slides? I can point out one thing on the slides, on the drawings that we have. It's engineered so that we can go back in and replace this at a later date with a canal, a U-shaped canal section, or steel trussed system, so that we're not leaving it and then guessing how we're going to go back in later. But there's a picture in there that shows that bench that we're building is 14 feet.
While
Take
she's bringing
12, 14 feet.
those pictures back, where's that's a long lead time for milled material, 3 months. Where are we going to get these?
Well, I can ask that a little bit for that. The material is very specialized. We have to get, we get marine grade lumber, which is hard to get. That's your old growth type timbers. The supporting structures are the pressure treated wood. It would be good if we could try and get away from some of that, but we can't right now. And that's the stuff that's caused our hazardous material cleanup, is that pressure-treated lumber, like we mentioned in the last board meeting. This is the picture right there. The big lead time on that, if you look at the bottom of this, is this area, go very slowly, right here. This is a concrete leveling block. There's 120 rock anchors that go into that concrete block, and then that block has to sit for another 3 days before we're able to start then building that MSE wall. It really did just become, you know, and if we can go back one, what was that? I have that right here. Those concrete piers right here are what we're reusing. We found out that even this one that's in this shaky kind of wall is actually doweled into some rock. And so we're not reinventing the wheel, and that's about 80 feet right there that we can do in a couple of weeks versus a month or so plus just to get it. And we can do it concurrently while Siblon is building the concrete section flume 4.
So you'll have the concrete footing in place so that if you want to come back later on.
We would try and reutilize those and would use the steel supports if that works. And then we look at the cost of that. Or is it easier and cheaper to come in and just blow those out and re-come up with an MSC wall? The advantage of the MSC wall is we can then mitigate for any debris that might come down off that hillside. Any debris that comes off that with a structure, we've got to build those those steel supports so they can take a hit. And if they do take a hit, you know, we may be replacing some of those. So it's that kind of dynamics that we look on all of those designs.
And Carrie, go back to that one drawing. Part of this is going to be a concrete canal with an MSC wall. It's the elevated section that we won't be doing all of it at the
From
time, but the,
Here over.
yeah,
It's all
there.
concrete.
So we do have access if the future, we want to change that out. So we're planning ahead for that. So, but it was a great question, Director Day. So one is cost recovery. We decided to do this, and 2, speed. East Bay Mud did a great presentation many years ago that they have 3 atmospheric rivers coming through on normal years of some dimension, maybe not this severe or this intense. We don't want to miss one of them. So if we can buy a month out of this and happens to get one of those big storms in here, we want to capture it and not wait 30 days. But before we move on, I just want to recognize Carrie. Carrie and Elizabeth's over there. Dan's over there. They're the ones that have been doing the field work out there. They're the ones tromping through the dust and debris and the hazardous waste to get this in mud now, and doing a great job. So I just want to acknowledge them for their efforts on this. It's remarkable response.
Thank you. And I think on a normal year where our storage wasn't so challenged, we'd say probably do the hard repair and wait the extra month or whatever. But in a critically dry year, we need to replenish our reservoirs as quickly as possible and like it was said, capture all the water we can. So, and this is not approving the design of the repair. It's just saying, let's get some materials on hand so that we're ready for the next one, which will probably come.
And as part of the strategy, as you saw that list of flume sections, if we do have, God forbid, have another fire through here, most of them are short.
Yeah.
We won't have to wait a long period of time if we decide to go back with wood. So that's kind of the strategy as well.
Just for your information, it's snowing at Whitehall.
So did we have a motion and second? Oh,
Yes,
good.
moved by Director Osborne, seconded by Director Veerkamp.
And we had board discussion. Any other board comments? Okay, we'll open it to public comment.
President Dwyer, at this time, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 11.
Thank you. Then please vote.
Division 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, then, thank you all very much. That concludes our business part of the meeting. Just calling your attention to future tentative items. LAFCO is there. Thank you, Director Verkamp. Engineering improvements, and the biggie for coming up is going to be the actual approval of the budget and the CIP. So That'll be the tough one. Just review those, be ready with your comments, your analysis. And before we adjourn, I think, again, district staff has proven once again that they're resilient, dedicated. You know, we've been through, in this 1 year, 4, probably 5 disasters. The power shutoff issues that we had last year, the COVID that just seems to never go away, the fire, the Caldor fire, and now we're facing the floods and mudslides and runoff. And like the director said, you know, the staff is out there weekends, midnight, trying to kludge together and keep the system running. So again, hats off. Any other board comments? Okay, thank you. We'll adjourn to, we will recess to, thank you. Closed session, any estimate of how long that might take? Counselor.
Thanks, President Dwyer. We will be meeting in closed session as identified on today's agenda under closed session A. I anticipate that will require at least 20 minutes.
20 minutes. So we will reconvene no sooner than 11:30. Thank you.
And for the purposes of the open board meeting, this board meeting will be closed and will not be reopened prior to 11:30 a.m. However, it could occur later.
Okay, we will reconvene the board meeting out of closed session. Counselor, anything to report?
Thank you, President Dwyer. The board provided district labor negotiators with direction but took no reportable action, and that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Any other board comments? Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you.
At 12:12.